checking on YouTube really quickly
Okay.
to make sure.
I see the little like thing going.
Awesome. So, welcome everyone to Vendoo's podcast. This is our third episode of Vendoo's podcast, and I'm super excited today to sit down with Ashley and talk about sourcing strategies. You might know her on Instagram as Recloth Collection. And before she introduces herself, I just want to say welcome again. Vendoo is your one-stop shop for all things e-commerce, diving deep into strategies, tools, and success stories to help you take your reselling business to the next level. So if you're a reseller looking to scale your online business, or you're just starting out and curious about the reselling world, you have come to the right place. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss out, and let's get started. Welcome, Ashley.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
We're so excited to have you. I was thinking about the first time we worked together. I think it was like 6 years ago at a Posh Fest party.
When I first started, yeah.
Nice. And I'm excited to sit down with you today because I think we actually talked about sourcing then. And now it's 6 years later. You're absolutely a pro reseller, have so much insight. If you're not following Ashley, definitely do so. So tell us a little bit about you, how long you've sold, when you got started.
Yeah, so I've been selling kind of like you said, like 5-6 years ago now. It was around like 2018, 2019, I want to say. And I've been doing it technically part-time since then. I do have a remote full-time job that I'm very thankful is pretty flexible. So I don't like to always compare myself part-time, but technically I do have a full-time job. And I kind of started off just selling things. I was able to find like some kind of donations, so items I was able to get for free. And I just started selling those on Poshmark. And then after I ran out of that stuff, I decided to go thrift shopping to continue selling on Poshmark because I was familiar with selling on it and then was enjoying just making the extra cash from it. So I was thrifting a little bit, working my full-time job out of college, just like trying to sell a couple things here and there. I was probably only making like a couple $100s a month, but I finally decided I wanted to like go full into it. And yeah, I started just continuing thrifting more. And then probably after 6 months is when I started sourcing items at a little bit more higher price point and focusing on higher profit items. And that's where my business completely flipped over from there. And now here I am 6-ish years later, still going strong. It's crazy like how fast the time actually goes.
Going very strong too. You wouldn't guess by looking at your content that you have a full-time job as well. So you do an amazing job of balancing both. I guess that makes you a part-time seller. No other industry really designates that like we do here, but it looks like you're putting in full-time work, effort, and enthusiasm.
Yeah, it kind of feels like it sometimes. I definitely could spend more time like thinking about all the other aspects that I do with like social media, with my job, just like balancing all that. Nothing really is full time, you know what I mean? It's almost like a 1/3 of the time. So it's definitely hard balancing everything, but yeah, I enjoy it.
Nice. And you primarily sell clothing, right? On Poshmark, or a little of everything, any other marketplaces?
Poshmark and eBay is my main one. I also recently been a little bit better about cross-listing over to Vestiaire. So those are the 3 platforms I'm currently active on. But Poshmark and eBay are my main ones, with Poshmark being probably the biggest, and eBay kind of lately it's been coming like a really, really close second. So
That's exciting. That's the beauty of cross-listing. I
yeah,
always look at my
exactly.
little analytics and I think like if it was just 1 or 2, like none of those other little
I
colors
can
would
never do
matter.
it. My income would be so much less if I wasn't cross-listing to the different places. So
For sure. So let's talk sourcing. I know that it's one of your strengths and it's something you share a lot on social media, and it's such an underrated topic in the community, right? We talk about pricing and photography and maximizing your listings with SEO, but getting back to the basics, like sourcing things that people want that will sell for a lot quickly, is such an underrated topic. So let's dive in. But let's backtrack first. What are some sourcing mistakes that you would say you made earlier in your reselling career?
yeah, I feel like when I think about my sourcing over the years, although it stayed like pretty much the same, like how I've sourced, just like the things I've learned and the mistakes I've made, I'm always continuously learning. And one of the things when I first started, especially coming from a place of not knowing brands, styles, I am a nutrition major by like trade. I not necessarily like the most in like style fashion type person. I wear like basics like every single day. I wouldn't call myself super fashionable, so I had no knowledge of anything. So how I started was really just learning brands, and once I learned kind of what was selling for a lot of money, because back then like Free People was expensive to me. So I had to learn from scratch. So I learned all the brands, and a big mistake I made was like really focusing on just brands and expensive brands. I still was trying to see what was selling well. It wasn't just like, I didn't make the full mistake of like buying something just because it sold for $2,000, but I really wasn't refining my craft of really seeing based off Poshmark and eBay how things were turning over, the activity items were getting.
Hello, everyone. I'm not sure that you can hear me. It does appear that we briefly froze and that we have lost Ashley. It also appears that she's coming back. Thank you so much for your patience with this delay. Ashley, are you here with me? Let me add you back.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know what happened. Like, I have great connection here, so I don't know what was wrong. I don't
I'm not
exactly
sure
know
either.
where it lost me at. Where exactly did it lose me at?
So you were explaining sourcing and learning your brands, but then maybe you started to overemphasize just brand. And
Yeah,
I think that's what we were going toward. Like, it's not just
okay.
about brand.
Yeah, so I was really focusing on brands since I was just learning everything. I was getting super excited learning about these brands. And I was still like, it wasn't just about brand, but it still was more of a focus on the brand because I was learning new brands. I would find it, it would sell well. And so that was just reinforcing the idea that the brands I was learning and just focusing on the brands was doing really well for me. And it did help me grow, but it's kind of what led me into a year or two later after that, still holding on to some of those items, or a couple items of the few that just weren't turning over, weren't selling. And as time went on, those styles just decreased even more, and the value of them, and why even to this day I've had a couple of items I've had to lose more money on, because before I really didn't lose much money on items, but the market's changed a lot and I've needed to shift my focus in order to make sure that I'm turning over styles a lot quicker.
That's a really good point. And I think you recently shared something about Lululemon. Maybe it was a couple of months ago now, but you shared some salts and you were like 2 years ago, like these Aligns were always good for like 120. And now, it's tough to get 40. Things absolutely change.
Mm-hmm.
And keeping up with that, so important.
Yeah, I literally started like selling. This was kind of like a little bit before I just went to Poshmark. I'd only sell Lululemon. I would model them. They would sell for like $100 easily. And yeah, now it's crazy that can barely sell them for like $40. So you never want to hold on to those items too long because you never know what's going to happen.
That's a good point. So how would you say the way you've sourced, like when you're in a thrift store, how would you say the way you've sourced has changed over the years? Your mentality, what you're looking for, how you judge if something's a good piece?
Mm-hmm. I would say in terms of what it looks like on the outside, like if I'm in person sourcing or even my online sourcing remains pretty much the same in terms of what it looks like on a general kind of like how I'm doing it. It's more of like how I'm analyzing the items that's looking different. So when I'm pulling up the items, I'm searching it. I'll first go ahead and search it on Poshmark, but as I'm searching it on Poshmark and eBay, I'm looking into how much is available versus how much has sold, when they sold, comments on the listings, likes on the listings, based on the comments, when do I think it was listed, being able to distinguish if something's been sold full price or not, if I think it's been sold in a bundle. All these different things go into it to determine if an item is selling fast and if it really sold for the price it did and how much I can actually think I'm going to get for an item. And then also being better about searching on Google, using to see if something's been dropped onto sale on the retail stores, because that's an indicator of how popular, how well an item is selling. I sell a lot of Revolve items, so if I'm looking on like Revolve, if it's within a bestseller category, or sometimes they'll say like this many people or have this in their cart, you know what I mean? And that can be an indicator too. So not just looking at that number or seeing, you know, what it's sold for in the past, but really all these other things to help distinguish. And it's definitely something you learn and gather over time. Because eventually now it just comes so easily, but it can be a little bit overwhelming at first, distinguishing how to do that.
You made a really good point that I don't think I've ever heard a seller talk about. Looking at retail, it makes so much sense. Right? Why would I buy Lululemons for 90 when for 104 I could buy them from Lululemon and get their, you know, warranty and lifetime exchange and things? But it's not something I hear people talking about. Usually you hear them talking about looking at active comps or sold comps, which you covered. But the retail, or if it's on clearance, maybe it had to be because it wasn't selling. Such a good tip. Such a good tip.
Mm-hmm. I find, especially now with all the platforms just changing a bunch of different things, shoppers are doing their research on things, seeing the best place where they can buy it, and they're not just going to stick to Poshmark or eBay. They're going to look everywhere. So if you have something that is priced higher than a clearance that somebody can get it for, they're not going to even take the chance paying new a tag on Poshmark when they can just have a better even return policy potentially on these resale sites. So it's something to consider. And some people are willing to pay $10 more, $20 more if they can know that they have an opportunity to return, versus on these secondhand sites, they may not. So
Yeah, it makes perfect sense, especially that when you're talking about higher value things. I love Revolve dresses, like their cocktail dresses, wonderful. But it's always a risk. It is a risk for us women, even with measurements, to buy a used dress that we can't return, or even if it's new. So making sure you're significantly under retail, huge. It makes sense. And I've never thought about it. Now I will. Thank you for that.
Yeah, and of course, if something's been sold out, it has a potential of having a resale value above. Just depends on how in demand it is, but they're all just so many different things that need to be considered.
That makes sense. That makes sense. So when does that, right? We talked about like market value, we talked about availability, but when you decide if an item is good beyond those, do you personally have firm rules about like cost of goods or like goal return on investment? Like how do you make that decision?
So I really don't have super firm rules for myself. It's really based off of how desirable an item is. If I can sell something in like a day and make like $30, I may be fine with that. Even if I pay like $40 for it. If I'm at a thrift store, it really just depends on the cost of goods, how desirable an item is, and how fast it's going to sell. Those are going to be the big things for me, because it's changed a lot for me over the past 3 months, because before in the past, my rules used to be I want to make a $50, $100 profit. And the mistake with that, what I was running into is I would be online. I would say, okay, this based off what it's sold for, kind of like what we just talked about, I think I can make a $50 profit for this. However, not being super great about considering the turnaround time, that's when eventually things just that $50 turned into $20, and I was only making a $20 profit off something, or losing money. So now in my head, if I can sell it and I know it's going to sell quickly and I know I feel confident about like that $30, that's a for sure thing, versus thinking, oh, this has sold before, I think I can sell for $50, not being as great about selling it quickly and things changing down the road and then eventually then making $30. So I'd rather be making that $30 in confidence in a week, a day, versus making $30 down the road after paying more money because I thought I can make $50, even $100.
It's a really good point, and I think it's a major pain point. A lot of sellers want to buy something for $2 and like flip it for 80 each time. It's unfortunately not the way it always goes. So I like that you said you would spend 40 even just to make 30 if you knew it could be done in a few days, like if you knew it was high demand. I think that's hard for people to get to. Myself included, I'm the people. It's hard to get there.
Yeah. And I mean, because as much as people talk about processing takes time, when you break down an item, it actually does not take a lot of time. Well, I think you've talked about this before too. Holding on to an item takes, while I've been moving, while I've been downsizing items, while I've been trying to liquidate items, it's not just like time, it's like mental time, exhaustion. It's like taking years off my life over here. And I feel like I'd rather just sell it and it sell quickly and not have to worry about the ins and outs. It'd be amazing, even if you think about it, you have such great items, you don't have to send offers out and you're just selling things and shipping things and posting things. Like it could be that easy if you were just selling the right items. It's only because we're selling items, not pricing items accordingly, that we're doing all this work selling strategies. Because honestly, at the end of the day, when you really break it down, if you have the right price, the right items, you almost don't even need selling strategies. And that's like the most ideal situation. It's not that easy, but like in an idealistic world, that's how like it could be. So
Yeah, it makes sense. And on one hand, like it's definitely not that easy, right? But on the other
no.
hand, yeah, I suppose if I was selling all Gucci bags in excellent condition, priced fairly, that I wouldn't need like these extensive, elaborate like offer strategies. It makes sense. It makes sense. And I think that sellers struggle with that too. You're right. We hold on to things way too long when we should potentially let go. And we spend so much time trying to reevaluate our listings, rephotograph, maximize them again for SEO, reprice them and everything, when sometimes they were just bad buys.
Yeah, exactly. 100%. I have had way too many of those as I've been downsizing my inventory and really going through. And honestly, going into a smaller space, moving into storage, it's really forced me to be or have a better look at those things and be a little bit more pickier and just be able to get things, photograph things, put them away, have them sell quickly, and then, make money. So
What is your current sourcing strategy? I know you mentioned online, you mentioned in person. Like, what's your ideal sourcing day?
yeah, so I really like to do it all. I do still like sourcing. Or in-person sourcing, like thrifting, but I probably only do that like once or twice a week. And I'm not a person where I can spend all day outsourcing. I only spend maybe like 2 hours max a day if I'm gonna go thrifting. It gets too much for me. It makes me feel busy in my day and it's a little bit overwhelming. Just with all the other things I have going on my day. So I'll probably do that. I do like to go to buy, sell traders and consignment stores. Really love those. I find I have the best return on investments from like buy, sell, trade stores. So I like going to those when I can. I usually end up going when I'm like taking items. Ideally, I would like to be able to go more to buy, sell, trade stores and consignment stores. Consignment stores here in Dallas are definitely a little bit more expensive, but they're fun because you're always coming across great items. And it's a great way to learn about new brands. And then online sourcing, I personally, and this is just sourcing in general, I haven't been doing a ton because I've been trying to save money for some loan payments. So I'm always conscious of what I'm spending. But in an ideal situation, I'm online sourcing every single day on the various platforms. And then I've also been doing like sample sales, which takes up a lot of money too. So right now I just went to a sample sale, spent thousands of dollars. So I kind of just be good about balancing myself and not going too overboard in other sourcing places if I've been spending a lot of money. So I really do like to do it all. I wish I could say like on this day and on this day I do this, but when you have like other parts of your life going on, other things with money, I kind of just do, and this is why I love reselling. I do what I want to do, what I like to do. It's nice having my salary so that I'm not having to be super rigid sometimes in my practices. But yeah, over the 6 years, I've learned what works for me, how much I can spend, what I need to kind of keep away in order to pay off my bills and other things. So I just know what works for me.
That's awesome. That's a little of everything. Tell us a little bit about the sample sales for someone
Yeah.
that's not familiar.
Yeah, so they actually just opened up a sample sale location, 260 sample sales in Dallas, which is why I've started to go to them more. And so a lot of them, they just depend. Each sample sale is different in terms of the pricing and such, but it's always really important to do the research on the items because they are going to be more expensive. But what's great about them is usually they are current within the past 2 years. So you're really not looking at older inventory. When I found, especially just from experience of shopping at sample sales, is that it really helps show you how important current styles are.
So they're primarily just like samples made by different brands, right?
Well, they're not just samples. They are just like overstock or
Okay.
like they're all
Overstock.
new, mostly newer tags. Majority of them are in great condition, new condition. Sometimes there are a couple flaws depending on the sale, like the rent or runway sale. Most people can be familiar about. They're notorious where everything has a flaw just because things are getting worn. That's technically the non-new tag type sales. So they usually have a couple sales, but a lot of them are just like things that were on their site the previous season. So
That's very cool. That sounds fun. If you're in Dallas, check that out.
yeah.
So what is the role of trends in your sourcing? I know you mentioned that they change, so you're cognizant of it, but then you mentioned sample sales are recent within the last 2 years. Like how important is it to you what's trending today when you source?
Mhm. Yeah, so I think when it comes down to it, and especially because I focus so much on just styles, and within the styles, I see whatever is selling well to me is also trending. So it can be specific within fashion trends for the season. I'm always staying up to date on like the current like winter and fall fashion trends right now. So a lot of times I stay up to date on those. And if an item or I guess a brand isn't necessarily as high at ASP, I will still be aware of brands. And when I'm outsourcing, or if I come across it, I'll know, hey, I should look into this. I should grab it and look into it further because it is an on style type of piece. And it's a brand that people know and love. So pairing those two things together, I know even though I don't normally source a certain brand, hey, this probably is going to be a good flip and will sell quickly because it's things people are looking for. So those are probably like the main trends when you think like right now for fall, you think about like the cherry color type stuff, greens, like suede jackets. Those are things I'll be aware of when I'm outsourcing. But there are also trends that aren't necessarily like really high, like trends that a lot of fashion bloggers are sharing that are still trending, but aren't as like high key, like white dresses, obviously for like bridal season, or white in general, or like strapless dresses right now. People aren't necessarily talking about those things as much. They were trends into like past seasons, but they're still trickling over. And so they're still technically trending, even though people aren't necessarily like full on talking about them. Trying to think of like other things, like even like classic things, like the minimalist style. That's not necessarily something that like is like trending because it's not something that's been like changing too much, but it's been popular for a long time now. But it still classifies as something that is trending because people are wanting it and looking for it.
That makes sense. And you mentioned fashion bloggers. Is that one of the ways you stay up to date on trends, like following different accounts on social media?
Yeah, so on Instagram, I focus more so on like just following fashion bloggers. So just coming across their posts, seeing what they're wearing, and just doing like a mental note of like when you see that stuff repetitively, you're kind of getting a gauge of what people are wearing. But then like on TikTok, I love coming across like I'll search like fashion trends like 2024, like searching specifically people talking about making those videos of what is currently on sale. And they'll usually go through like, what they're seeing on Pinterest, and I'll use that to distinguish like what is currently trending for the season.
That makes sense. How fun is it that this gets to be the research that we do for
Yeah.
work? I love it. That's awesome. So, Ashley, how do you feel? I know you talked about style being as important as brand, but how do you feel about BOLO lists? And for anyone who's not familiar with the acronym, it's Be on the Lookout List, and they're generally lists of brands.
Yeah, so this is coming. I had BOLO lists before, and I actually like kind of stopped doing them because, like how I talked about earlier, it was kind of what caused me to pick up bad buys. And it's not something people do intentionally. I think everyone has really great motives behind having BOLO brands, but just understanding the mindset of a new seller and how excited you can get and how some of those emotions come into finding a brand, they can be a little bit not destructive is like a really strong word, but like it can cause you to go down a rabbit hole of picking up those items that aren't necessarily as good because you kind of like fall back on these lists and you don't really do as much of your own research as you need to. You're like, oh, I saw this, so this must be great. Because when you're starting off, you forget that. And that was me literally for like 3-4 years of selling. So that's why I had a BOLO list, and that's why I shifted to having a newsletter that goes over the trends and styles that are selling well within the certain brands because I've realized that like the reselling landscape is changing so much. So I wanted something that would be current, something that would go out like weekly, not like a static thing. That was going to just be like needing to be like updated all the time because it would need to be updated like every single week if that were the case because things are changing so much. So I personally focus on very, very specific styles, not just like, this brand and this category, because that's kind of what I did with my past BOLO list. Because even if you say, like frame jeans, even like frame baggy jeans, like, okay, well then skinny jeans are going to come back in and things are going to change. And then also frame is coming out with certain styles of baggy jeans that are more popular than these older style baggy jeans that aren't selling well. So if someone says frame baggy jeans and you're going out and you find a pair from like 3 years ago, somehow that wouldn't be a thing, but they did, that doesn't mean it's going to sell as well as what maybe something they had that's being sold currently that's actually selling well. So that's why it's so important to be highly specific. And I just know from my own experience in my past list, sometimes they can't be. So you just gotta be careful. They definitely mean well, and you can definitely utilize them. You just have to be so knowing of how to do your own research to distinguish when you come across that certain brand and style if it is actually selling well.
That makes sense. Like a good reference. I think, like you said, they mean well because a lot of brands we've just never heard of. I mean, if I go on Revolve, there's just brands that I don't know. And sometimes the nicest, most luxurious brands are like the ones, we've never heard of even. So I get the point, but you're right. And I like that you brought up jeans because I had a very similar conversation recently. Someone was like, what about this brand jeans? I'm like, well, not if they're skinny, but if they're straight, like we could maybe if it makes sense. So I know that you don't prioritize brand at all, but if you were going to recommend a few brands that you think are generally good to resell, style dependent, of course, or if let's say you could only sell a few brands for the rest of your reselling career, what would those brands be?
So I definitely still care about brands. It's more so about just, knowing within the styles that are selling well. I would say like for right now, I love selling like all the tucker neck brands, but I'm kind of getting nervous because they are getting somewhat saturated. I have seen a dip already in them. So it's just something I'm currently being aware of. I love selling Reformation. I love selling a lot of the Revolve type brands. Specific Revolve brands, it highly depends sometimes just on the style. I like selling dresses, like wedding guest type dresses. I also love selling like sweaters. So I love like Cezanne for sweaters. I love Jenny Kane is like hit or miss. That's another one. Jenny Kane, I don't pick up a lot of the sweaters anymore. I used to pick up every single sweater 2 years ago, but now even some of the cashmere ones don't sell for as well. For what I know in my experience, you can purchase it for, if that makes sense. If you can find it thrifting, obviously. So a lot of this comes from my experience of what I know is common in the secondhand market of what to source things for. Because I source in every capacity from thrifting to buy, sell, trade store to online, I know what is a reasonable price to find an item because I'm coming across it all the time. So when I speak to if something's selling well, I'm speaking to what I know you're probably going to find it cost-wise versus what you can sell it for. So those are a couple. Yeah, Cezanne's probably a big one for me. And what else? Yeah, Cezanne and Reformation are probably two of my biggest ones right now. Probably just because I just came from a Reformation sample sale. So that's another huge reason.
Oh my God, I would love to go to a Reformation sample sale.
Yeah.
That is so cool. All right. In these last couple minutes, I just have two more questions for you, Ashley. If you could tell your younger reseller self or your newer reseller self one piece of advice, what would that be?
I would say going back to kind of what we discussed before, because it honestly was the biggest thing, is being aware of how, like, you need to be able to go to the secondhand platforms, go to Google, and really be able to figure out how fast something is going to sell and what you could probably price it for and what you reasonably can get for it based off supply and demand and turnover of the item, and how that's going to distinguish what you purchase it for. Everyone's going to be different between what they want to make on an item. So it's hard to say. I shared some of my personal, what I would do, but so I can't say for sure, but that is the main thing. If you want to be a successful reseller and you want to make money, Doesn't matter at the end of the day, even fully like what your pictures look like I said, the styling strategies, if you're able to find those items and get them and distinguish what you are going to sell them for, that's the biggest thing. Just like those styles, like really knowing what those styles are and how to determine if it's actually a good item to pick up.
All about the sourcing and the market value. Makes sense.
Yeah.
And can you tell us how Vendoo has helped you in your reselling journey?
Yes. Oh my gosh. I have been obsessed with Vendoo ever since I got it. Because I am cross posting everywhere, like we talked about, like eBay is still a huge thing. I need to be listing my places over everywhere. There are still some places like eBay still has a couple brands that will sell better on there for them. So I love to be able to super easily relist, list on Vendoo. I do everything on there, and that just helps break down the time so I can focus on sourcing. So I really don't need to spend so much time on listing it here, posting it over here, worrying about like how long it's going to take me to relist the item, if I need to decrease the pricing, because it's one of those things where sometimes I forget how great Vendoo is because I'm not even doing too much on it, because it saves me so much time, so I can focus on these other things, which is honestly the best thing.
That is the best thing. That it's saving you so much time, you like can't even fathom the time saving.
Yeah.
I love to hear it. So, before we wrap up, can you please tell everyone where to find you again?
Yeah.
I know you have a newsletter, you're active on social.
Yeah, so I'm Recloth Collection everywhere. There's usually a space between collection, like on my name, but Recloth Collection, TikTok, Instagram. If you want to go back through any of my old YouTube videos, I have a bunch out there. I have a lot of what sold videos and stuff like that. I haven't been posting on there just because they take a long time. But if you want to stay up to date with my current videos, I'm usually a lot better about TikTok, and I'm trying to get back to Instagram. But you can find me everywhere under that name.
Definitely follow her. I love her content. And Ashley, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to sit down with you. We appreciate you taking the time today.
Thank you. I've had so much fun.
Thank you. And thanks everyone for joining us. Make sure you hit subscribe so you'll be notified for future episodes of our podcast. And we'll see everyone next time. Thanks, Ashley. Thanks, everyone. Happy selling.